The Thanksgiving my dad paid, everyone's rent except mine, I was the one who carved the turkey. He'd handed me the knife with a proud smile and said, "You're the steady one, Nina. You know what you're doing." Then, 20 minutes later, he stood at the head of the table, raised his glass, and announced that he was going to take care of everyone's housing for the winter. Everyone except the daughter actually living paycheck to paycheck. 2 weeks later, he was at my apartment door in the same wrinkled dress shirt, eyes bloodshot, begging me to save his home. My name is Nina Clark. I'm 32 years old, a registered nurse, and the child in my family everyone calls the strong one. That night was the last time my father called my independence a compliment, and my last time quietly fixing his messes. Thanksgiving, the big announcement. Thanksgiving at Dad's house was a loud, chaotic affair. He lived in a 4-bedroom ranch on the edge of town with my stepmom, Sandra, and her 2 kids from her first marriage, Kyle, 29, and Mia, 26. Add my younger brother, Evan, 25, and his on-again/off-again girlfriend, Kayla, my grandma, and a few drifting cousins, and you had a dozen people squeezed around a table meant for 8. I was the first one there, as usual. I'd brought mashed potatoes, green beans, and a pumpkin pie. Always the overachiever. Dad said, kissing my cheek. I could have done the sides, you know. "You bought the turkey pre-brine, Dad." I pointed out. "Let me have this." He grinned. "Fair enough," he said. "You'll probably run this place when I'm old and decrepit." "Pretty sure that ship has sailed," I said, glancing at his salt and pepper hair. He laughed. We had this easy banter sometimes, him and me. It made it easy to forget the other parts. The parts where he treated my effort like an inexhaustible resource and other people's chaos like irresistible charity cases. Sandra bustled in and out, topping off wine glasses. Evan and Kyle argued about football. Mia filmed a TikTok in the kitchen, nearly backing into the hot oven. "Can you not do that in front of the turkey?" I snapped, grabbing the door handle before she burned herself. "Relax, Nurse Ratchet," she said, rolling her eyes. "I'm just getting content." "It's Ratchet," I muttered, "and you're welcome for your unburned face." She flipped her hair. Dad called the family to the table. "I want to do this right," he said as everyone jostled for a seat. "Sit, sit. We'll say grace. Then Nina will carve." "Nina always carves," Evan said. "She's the only one who won't massacre the bird." "Because she's careful," Dad said. "Always has been." I smiled, a little proud, a little wary. We prayed. We passed dishes. People dug in. Halfway through, Dad stood and tapped his fork on his glass. "Ahem," he said. "Can I get everyone's attention for a second?" Conversations tapered off. He loved this part, a captive audience. "I know this has been a rough year," he began. "Prices up, wages down, landlords being sharks." There were murmurs of agreement. Kyle smirked. "Preach," he said. "My landlord's gonna raise rent again. Might have to move back in here, old man." Mia made a dramatic face. "Don't even joke," she said. "I can barely afford avocado toast, as it is." People laughed. Dad spread his hands. "I've been thinking," he said. "I'm not a rich man, but I've done okay. I've got this house. I've got my job. I remember what it felt like starting out with nothing. So, I want to help." He paused for effect. "I'm paying 3 months of rent for each of you kids," he said. "December, January, February. Consider it my Christmas present to all of you who are out there grinding." Cheers erupted. "Dad, are you serious?" Evan hooped. "You're a legend, Tom," Kyle said, clapping him on the back. Mia actually squealed. "Oh my God, I can finally get out of that roach motel," she said. "You're the best." Grandma dabbed at her eyes. "You've got a generous heart, son," she said. I sat there, fork paused halfway to my mouth, heart pounding, because he'd said, "Each of you kids." But then he started listing names. "Kyle and Mia," he said. "Obviously. trying to start your lives in this stupid, expensive city. They beamed. Evan, he went on. You and Kayla. I know you've been behind since you got laid off. This'll give you a cushion. Thank you, Evan said, genuinely choked up. He turned toward me. And Nina, he said. I exhaled, ready to murmur thanks, already mentally earmarking the money for my own rent and the credit card I'd maxed last month when my car's transmission died. You, he continued, smiling wider, don't need it. There was a ripple of awkward laughter. I blinked. He clapped his hands. You're the only one I'm not worried about, he said. You've got your degree. You've got your nurse job. You've been on your own since what, 22? You're killing it. You don't need your old man paying your bills. I felt every ice swing to me. Heat crawled up my neck. That's not really the point, Dad. I said slowly. What is the point? He asked. The point is, you said each of you? I said, you're paying 3 months of rent for everyone at this table with a lease, except me. He laughed. You want charity now? He teased. The girl who had 3 jobs in college and refused to let me buy her textbooks. That was because you said you couldn't. I reminded him. Because you were barely keeping the lights on. Well, things are a little better now, he said, and I want to help the ones still getting on their feet. You, Nina, are on your feet. You're the one I brag about, my self-sufficient kid. Sandra chimed in. He's not saying you're not included, she said quickly. He's saying you don't need this as much as they do. You've always been good with money. So my reward is nothing? I asked, because I got my act together without you. Now, the silence was more than awkward. It was thick. We can talk about it later, Dad said, waving a hand. I'm not trying to start drama at Thanksgiving. Just accept the compliment. It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like a punishment wrapped in praise. Grandma patted my arm. You know your father loves you, she said. He's just proud of how you turned out. I swallowed everything I wanted to say about the student loans still chewing at my paycheck, about the 12-hour shifts that left my back aching, about the way rent had gone up twice in the last year while my wage stayed nearly flat, about the help I'd given him and my siblings for years without anyone making announcements over turkey. Instead, I smiled tightly. Enjoy your cushion, I said to the table, raising my glass. And thanks for dinner, Dad. I caught Evan's apologetic look. Mia's guilt for half a second before it slid off her face, Kyle's oblivious grin. Dad sat down, satisfied. In that moment, I decided something quietly. The next time someone I loved made a choice about money that affected me without asking, I wouldn't soften it for them. The history of you'll be fine. The Thanksgiving slight stung so badly because it wasn't new. It was just the loudest version of a theme that had played in my life for as long as I could remember. Growing up, the script was simple. Evan was sensitive. He couldn't handle pressure. When he struggled with school, Dad said, he's not book smart like you. We need to be there for him. Kyle and Mia, as step-siblings, were adjusting to a new family. They'd grown up with different rules, so when they forgot chores or blew through allowance money, Sandra would say, they're just not used to the structure. Give them time. Me? You're the oldest, Dad would say. You know better. If I got AB, what happened? You're smarter than that. If I forgot to empty the dishwasher, I'm disappointed. Nina, you're my one reliable one. When we were teenagers, and Evan crashed my car backing out of the driveway because he didn't see the trash cans, Dad said, we'll handle it. It's not fair to make him pay. He's just a kid. I was 17. So was he. I paid the deductible from my part-time job. When Kyle dropped out of community college after 1 semester, Sandra cried. He's lost, she said. We can't just abandon him. He needs to know we've got his back. Dad co-signed his next apartment lease. When he predictably stopped paying rent, guess who the landlord called? Not me, technically. But guess whose number Dad called next, voice tight, saying, "Listen, can you float me $600 until Friday? It's for Kyle's place. I don't want him out on the street." I floated him the money. The Friday repayment never came. That pattern repeated in different flavors for a decade. Evan's overdue phone bill. Mia's emergency flight back from Cancun after a breakup. Grandma's prescription. Dad's car repair. Always framed as temporary. Always framed as, "You're doing so well, sweetheart. You don't even feel it." They never saw the spreadsheets I lived by. The color-coded budget, where helping family had its own line that slowly crept from yellow to red. They didn't see me pick up extra shifts to cover the gap. They just saw me handle it. "You should be proud," Dad would say. "We raised a girl who doesn't need us." He conveniently forgot that my not needing them had freed them to need me endlessly. 3. The call 2 weeks later. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I was halfway through my third consecutive night shift. It was 3 a.m. The hospital corridor glowed harsh and sterile. My feet ached. My scrub top smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. I was charting vitals when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I wasn't supposed to check personal calls on duty, but the caller ID made my heart lurch. Dad. He knew my schedule. He never called in the middle of the night unless something was wrong. I stepped into the staff bathroom and answered, whispering. "Hey," I said, "everything okay?" His voice was rough. Too rough. "Nina," he said, "are you busy?" "At work," I said. "What's going on?" He exhaled shakily. "I need your help," he said. There it was. Reflexively, my muscles tensed. "Is someone hurt?" I asked. "Is Sandra okay? Grandma?" "They're fine," he said quickly. "It's me. Money." I closed my eyes. "Of course. What happened?" I asked, already bracing. "You know how I told you things were better?" He said. "They're not. The shop's been slower than I thought. The landlord raised rent on Kyle and Mia again, and I covered it up front. And then the furnace here went out, and then the property taxes hit, and—" "Dad," I interrupted gently. "How much?" He was silent. 10, he said finally. 10,000. I nearly dropped the phone. 10,000. I repeated. "It's the back mortgage payment and the taxes," he rushed on. I thought I could juggle it, but the bank, they sent a notice. If I don't catch up in 2 weeks, they start foreclosure proceedings. I leaned against the cold tile wall. The same house where he'd just written 3 months' rent checks for 3 adult children. The same man who told a room full of people, "I didn't need help. You didn't tell me you were behind." I said, "I didn't want you to worry." He said, "You already do so much." I thought I could handle it. Then Thanksgiving. I wanted to do something big. Something that showed I was still, I don't know, the provider. "You used money you didn't have to show off," I said quietly. He winced. "I guess when you say it like that, it sounds stupid," he admitted. But at the time, it felt generous. It felt like generosity to everyone else. I said, "It felt like a slap to me." He sighed. "I know," he said. "I've been thinking about that. Sandra says I hurt your feelings. She's right. I was proud of you. I wanted them to see what I see. The one kid who made it. I figured you'd understand why I focused on the others. You always do. And now you want me to understand why I should save your house." I said. Silence. "I'm not asking you to give it to me," he said. "A loan. I'll pay you back. I swear. I've got a line of credit application in. I just need to keep the bank from pulling the trigger until it comes through. You're the only one I can turn to." In the distance, I heard a call light ping. I had maybe 1 minute before I needed to be back on the floor. My brain raced. I had savings. Not a ton. Enough for maybe 5 months of my rent and expenses. I could technically send him 10,000. I could also blow my own only cushion and risk ending up in his position if anything went wrong. All for a man who had just publicly declared that paying other adults rent was more urgent than acknowledging mine. Old Nina, the one who picked up the phone every time, wanted to say, "Of course, Dad. I'll Venmo you tonight." New Nina, the one who'd walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner with a quiet decision in her pocket, stayed silent for a long beat. "Nina," he said, uneasy, "you there?" "I'm here," I said. "I'm just thinking." "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death," he said. "They'll take the house. Where would I go? What about Sandra? We'd have to move into some crappy apartment. Your grandma, she can't do stairs. You should have thought of that before you took on your kids' rent and a new truck payment," I said, sharper than I planned. He bristled. "I help my kids," he said. "That's what parents do." "And now you're asking your kid for help," I said. Again. I heard the hurt in his exhale. "This is different," he said. "This is the roof over my head." "It was the roof over my head, too," I said quietly, "until you told me, at 19, I was an adult, and it was time to stand on my own. I did, without asking you for 10 grand. "That was different," he muttered. "Was it?" I asked. A nurse poked her head into the bathroom. "Code gray on 4C, she said. "You free?" I held up a finger. "I have to go," I told Dad. "This isn't a quick yes or no. We'll talk tomorrow, during the day." "Nina," he started. "I am not wiring you $10,000 at 3 in the morning on the phone," I said firmly. "Sleep. We'll talk when I'm off shift." I hung up before he could argue. It was the first time I'd cut a conversation with him short on purpose. The first time I hadn't rushed to fill his panic with my own solutions. My hands shook as I washed them, but my step was steady when I went back onto the floor. A little while later, pushing a med cart, I caught my reflection in the glass of a patient room. Same circles under my eyes. Same messy bun. Different spine. 4. Advice from someone who sees the whole ledger. When my shift ended at 7 a.m., I didn't go straight home and collapse. I drove to a diner near the courthouse where I knew Tanya, one of the social workers from the hospital, liked to grab coffee. She was in her 40s, wore sensible shoes and sharp glasses, and had the incredible talent of telling the truth without flinching. She'd become my unofficial therapist in the break room. "I'm buying," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. She narrowed her eyes. "Either you got a raise or you're about to tell me you did something stupid with money," she said. "Option 3, I replied. "I'm trying not to. I laid it all out. Thanksgiving, the rent announcement, the 3 a.m. call, the $10,000 ask." She stirred her coffee slowly. "You know what I'm going to say," she said. "Finally." "I think I do," I said, "but I'm not sure my guts will let me do it." "Your guts have been running the show for 32 years, she said. "How about we let your brain take a turn?" I snorted. "Okay, brain," I said. "What's the move?" "First," she said, holding up a finger, "acknowledge the facts. You have some savings. You do not have enough to comfortably lose 10 grand without major consequences. If, say, you get sick, lose your job, or your car dies again." I nodded. "Second," she continued, "this is not the first time he's asked you for money, nor is it the first time he's prioritized your siblings' comfort over your security." Another nod. "Third," she said, "he chose very recently to make a public statement about whose rent was more worthy of his help. That wasn't just tone deaf. That was data." "Data," I repeated. She gestured with her spoon. "You're a numbers person, Nina," she said. "You know patterns. Look at the pattern, not the plea." I stared at the table. "So no," I said slowly. "I'm not telling you to punish your father," she said. "I'm telling you to stop treating your bank account like the emergency parent bailout fund. If you want to help at all, You do it in a way that doesn't endanger you. And you attach conditions. Like what? I asked. Like if you give him anything, it's an amount you can afford to never see again, she said. And it's given with clear terms. This is a one-time gift. Going forward, you need to cut expenses, ask the kids you just helped, or sell assets. He'll say I'm cold. I murmured. He already thinks you're strong, she countered. Strong people can survive name-calling. Broke people with no backup? Not so much. She leaned in. And don't you dare take out a loan, dip into retirement, or put this on a credit card, she said. That's just lighting your own future on fire to keep someone else warm for 5 minutes. I laughed despite the lump in my throat. I hate that you're right, I said. You hate that I'm saying out loud what you already know, she replied. There's a difference. When I left the diner, I didn't have a full script, but I had a boundary. And the first line of it was no loan. 5. Ask the kids you just helped. Dad called again at noon, just as I was about to crash. He sounded like he'd been up all night. Nina, he said, I'm sorry to wake you. I'm awake, I said. We need to talk about more than just the money. He exhaled audibly. Okay, he said. I deserve that. I'm going to be blunt. I said, I cannot give you $10,000. But you have, he started. I have some savings I cut in for me, for emergencies like rent, car repairs, or losing my job. Giving you that money would put me one crisis away from being in your position. I won't do that. Silence. I understand, he said slowly. I guess I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you didn't ask, I said. Just like you didn't ask at Thanksgiving whether I might need a cushion too. That was different, he protested weakly. I was just trying to help the ones you thought were struggling. I finished based on a story in your head, not based on reality. He was quiet. I'm not going to argue that, he muttered. I screw that one up. Yes, I said. You did. I let that sit. Here's what I can do, I continued. I can send you a smaller amount, once, enough to maybe help with a bill or two, not the entire problem. And I can sit down with you and go through your budget, help you call the bank, talk about options, refinancing, selling assets, cutting expenses. His voice tightened. Selling, he said. You mean the truck, the house? I mean looking at everything. I said, like an adult, including the possibility that you can't afford to live like you have been. You want me to give up my house, he said, hurt. The house I raised you in. You're the one who mortgaged it to the hilt, I replied. I didn't sign those papers. He let out a bitter laugh. You sound like a banker, he said. I sound like a nurse who's watched people lose everything because they refused to face numbers until the sheriff was at their door. I said. He sighed. What about a loan? He tried again. I can sign a note. We could put something in writing if you don't trust me. It's not about trust, I said. It's about capacity. I do not have the capacity to be your lender. If the bank won't lend to you at a rate that makes sense, what does that tell you about how risky this is? That they're greedy, he said, or that you've stretched everything as far as it can go? I countered. He was quiet for a long moment. So that's it, he asked finally. You're leaving me to drown? I'm refusing to jump in without a life vest, I said. You're not alone. You have options. You just don't like them. He scoffed. Like what? He asked. Call the kids you just helped. I said, ask Kyle and Mia if they can give even part of that rent back. Ask Evan if he can skip a concert and throw a couple hundred at the problem. This was supposed to be a family, not a one-way pipe from you to them, and from me to you. They don't have it, he said immediately. They're just getting by. So, am I? I said, the difference is you believe they're just getting by, and you assume mine isn't real because I don't dramatize it. He made a sound between a laugh and a sob. You're right, he said. I hate that you're right. Welcome to my life, I said, echoing what I told Tanya. We talked more. I offered to come over Sunday with my laptop. I offered to look at his budget. I offered to bring him to a nonprofit credit counselor I knew from the hospital. I did not offer to be his easy button. He accepted the halfway help. Grudgingly. You've changed, Nina, he said at the end of the call. Good, I replied. So have you? 6. Sunday numbers and sibling responses. On Sunday afternoon, I drove out to Dad's house with my laptop and a notepad. Sandra met me at the door, wringing her hands. I feel awful, she said. We didn't realize how much he'd been juggling. I don't know what I thought, that the money always stretched. Somehow. Money doesn't stretch, I said. It breaks. We spread out on the kitchen table. Dad slid a folder toward me. Here's everything, he muttered. Mortgage statements, tax bills, credit cards, the loan for the truck. I flipped through. Tanya's voice echoed in my head. Look at the pattern, not the plea. The pattern was clear. Mortgage, refinanced twice, current payment higher than it had ever been. Truck loan, brand new F-150 he'd bought to haul things, but mostly used to drive to work and show off. Credit card, balances from dinners out, electronics, hotel rooms for his just because weekends with Sandra, bank statements, checks to Kyle, Mia, and Evan labeled help with rent, loan, gas money. In a year where his income had stayed flat, his expenses had spiked. We need to separate wants from needs, I said. He bristled. You sound like my dad, he said. Your dad died, renting a single wide. I replied. He told me once he wished he'd listened to his own spreadsheets. Learn from him. I made a list. Things he could cut. The truck could be sold and replaced with a cheaper used car. Cable package could be downgraded. Restaurant spending could drop. Automatic gifts to adult children could stop. He argued each point. I'm not 20, he said. I worked hard. I deserve nice things. You do? I said, but not at the cost of losing the roof over your head. You keep living like you're still climbing the ladder. You're not. You're on the rung. You have to protect it. We called the mortgage company, explained the situation. Because he hadn't missed too many payments yet, they were willing to consider a temporary modification if he made a good faith payment and showed a budget. The good faith payment could be the smaller amount I'd agreed to send, $2,000. It wasn't 10. It was enough to show up in their system. He bristled again at the idea of telling them he'd cut back on helping the kids. They'll think I'm a bad father, he said, or they'll think you're someone choosing to prioritize keeping a home over enabling 3 adults. I replied. He texted the boys. He didn't like asking. They didn't like being asked. Kyle replied with a string of excuses. Mia sent, OMG, I wish I could. We're so tight and sorry, loudly crying faced at Evan, to his credit, offered $200 and actually sent it. Later, when Emily found out what I told him, Emily always found out, she texted me. Mia, thanks for turning Dad against us. Unamused face. Me, I didn't turn him. I turned the lights on. Dad eventually conceded to relisting the truck. It sold slower than he wanted and for less than he thought it was worth. But the smaller used sedan we found together got him to work just as well. Months down the line, when the bank finally approved the mortgage modification, he called me. They said I have to take this budgeting class. He grumbled. A damn class. I'm 58. Or you could give them the house, I said. He muttered something unrepeatable, then added grudgingly, I'll take the class. 7. The next Thanksgiving. The following Thanksgiving, Dad's house was quieter. Kyle and Mia had decided to go to their mother's. Evan worked a double shift at the warehouse. Grandma had passed that spring. We'd had beans at her wake. It was just me, Dad, and Sandra. I brought a smaller turkey. Fewer sides. He still handed me the knife. You're the steady one, he said out of habit. This time, it didn't sting. I learned from the best, I said, even when the best had to relearn some math. He grimaced. Still mad at me? He asked. I carved a slice. Less mad, I said, more adjusting. He nodded. I'd been thinking about last year, he said, about the rent thing, about the speech. I hear it in my head at night. Good, I said lightly. I meant it as a compliment. He said, I meant you don't need my help anymore, as pride, not punishment. I know, I said. Intent doesn't erase impact, though. He sighed. I also realized something in that budgeting class, he admitted. Apparently I've been using you the way I thought I'd use them. Like some kind of emergency fund, I didn't have to think too hard about paying back. Apparently, I agreed. He looked at me. Thank you, he said quietly, for not giving me that 10 grand. I blinked. Come again. I asked. If you'd given it to me, I never would have looked at anything else, he said. I'd have paid the bank and gone right back to buying crap and bailing them out. Forced me to see how far off the rails I'd gone. I set the knife down. You're welcome, I said. I think. We ate, talked about normal things, work, weather. The fact that the truck, as much as he loved it, had been overkill. When we cleared the table, he stopped me. By the way, he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. This is for you. Nobody died, did they? I asked, half joking. He rolled his eyes. No, he said. It's not a check. It's something else. I opened it. Inside was a short handwritten note. Nina, I've updated my will. No more. Everything split 3 ways nonsense. Sandra gets the house if she outlives me, if she can afford the payments. You get first right of refusal if she can't. Kyle and Mia and Evan, they'll get whatever's left in cash once debts are paid, in proportion to what they put back in, if anything. I also put in writing that any money I've borrowed from you is to be repaid from my estate before anyone else gets a dime. Not because I want you waiting around for that, but because I want it clear I owe you. I should have been the one teaching you about boundaries. Instead, you taught me. Love, Dad. My throat closed. For the record, he added, fidgeting, that whole, she's the only one I'm not worried about line, still true. But now I know that means I should stop giving you reasons to worry about me. I laughed. Baby steps, I said. 8, what I stopped paying for. Here's the thing about being the responsible one. If you've lived your whole life in that role, your first no will feel like violence to you and to them. They will call you selfish, ungrateful, cold. You will be tempted to soften it, to apologize, to over-explain. But if you've always been the one silently picking up the check, financially, emotionally, logistically, your no is not an attack. It's a recalibration. When my dad paid everyone's rent at Thanksgiving except mine, he thought he was rewarding my independence. He didn't see that he was also revealing his own assumptions, that my needs were always less urgent, that my savings were always more available, that my feelings were always more durable. 2 weeks later, when he came to me begging for help, the old script would have demanded that I swallow that insult and write the check. Instead, I wrote a new script, one where I can love my family and still keep my own lights on, one where I don't set myself on fire to keep other people warm, one where "you'll be fine" isn't used as an excuse to never offer me a blanket. If you grew up being the one they know will land on her feet, I hope my story gives you at least one solid, guilt-resistant sentence to try on the next time somebody slides a bill toward you like it's your destiny. I can't do that. But here's what I can do. Sometimes what you can do is hand the check back across the table and say, without anger, you made this choice. You get to pay for it.